Hey everybody, our next and our last screencast for Unit 3 is Flawed Peace. Woodrow Wilson and the other Allied leaders are going to meet at the Palace of Versailles, right here, awesome building, to basically lay down the law for what's going to happen at the end of World War I. So our learning outcomes, you should be able to describe Wilson's plan for peace, discuss the debate over the League of Nations that the U.S. Congress had, identify and understand the weaknesses of the Treaty of Versailles, and understand the legacies and impact that World War I had on the countries involved. Now, Wilson's 14 points. He is going to be considered a prophet of peace. He's going to be almost like a Jesus-like figure, a savior for a lot of these European countries. They're going to see him coming in as being the more so equal-minded and level the playing field compared to the other two guys. His 14 points, his plans for peace, as soon as number one stops moving, there we go. No secret treaties. What that means is open diplomacy, so everyone's going to know who everyone else's friends are. Number two, reduce militaries or disarmament altogether. Now, he's not necessarily just talking about Germany, but he's talking about across the board. The less military that one has, the less of a chance they're going to try to take over another country. Freedom of the seas or free trade. And you can also see number four, lowering tariffs for free trade. Freedom of the seas kind of relates to the sinking of merchant ships from Germany in World War I. Number four, lower tariffs, which is going to create more competition on a global scale. Number 5, and really 6 through 13, self-determination for European minorities. A lot of those people that are living in other countries that are of other ethnic groups are now looking for their own country, to be ruled by one of their own. 6 through 13 is new borders, and that's basically 9 new countries that are going to get developed at the end of World War I. And number 4, the crown jewel of the whole thing, the League of Nations. Now, Wilson is going to have to concede a lot of these things. Basically, the Allied leaders are going to tell him, no, flat out not going to happen. If you want us to join the League of Nations, then you're going to have to concede a lot of these things. So Wilson ends up basically giving up a lot of this stuff to keep the Prime Minister of Britain and the French Premier even interested in joining the League of Nations. The Allies itself, as I kind of just outlined, they're going to reject Wilson's plan for peace. The big three, they're going to meet to discuss the details of the war. Wilson is going to call this the war to end all wars, and what he wants to do is really make the world safe for democracy. The problem is the French Premier and the Prime Minister of England, they're going to have different goals. Clemenceau of France is pretty upset. He wants very harsh measures for Germany and wants a weaker Germany after the treaty has been signed. He's now been involved in a second invasion from the Germans, the first in the Franco-Prussian War. David Lloyd George of Great Britain, he wants to preserve that British Empire, and also he ran on the campaign slogan of making Germany pay. So he wants the reparations of all the costs of war from Germany. Now the big three, you can see there on the end, there is David Lloyd George in the center. Clemenceau kind of looks like the Monopoly guy, and there's Woodrow Wilson on the end. Now your textbook, we'll call them the big four because they include the guy on the right, Vittorio Orlando. I don't. Italy starts out on the side of the Germans. They kind of don't do a whole lot of fighting, and they're only really there for a land grab. They want access to that Balkan territory area. So I don't really consider him part of the big four like your textbook does. Now the treaty itself, 1919, the big three and the defeated nations are going to meet at Versailles. This is the first time that these defeated nations are even going to see the treaty. This is going against tradition of all other peace treaties that have ever really been signed. They've always been discussed with those defeated powers. It's going to establish 9 new nations in Eastern Europe. The Ottoman Empire is going to get broken up into 5 different areas and basically handed over to Britain and France. Very imperialist here. They're going to say, we will rule you until you're ready for your own self-governance. So think about when they are going to feel that that's going to be a possibility, which is, if they had it their way, probably never. They're going to bar Germany from maintaining an army. This is what Clemenceau wants. He doesn't want a powerful Germany anymore. Germany is going to have to pay war reparations of $33 billion. Think about that, $33 billion in 1919. That is a crazy amount of money. And the area that the Germans had taken during the Franco-Prussian War, Alsace and Lorraine, will be returned to France. Now, here's Europe in 1914. We've kind of seen a similar looking map before. You can see the Triple Entente, the Central Powers, and there's the neutral powers there in blue. Now, what's going to happen in just 5 years? Look at the difference. Holy cow. We have Eastern Prussia, Poland is now going to be there, Czechoslovakia, Austria-Hungary, Yugoslavia, Romania, all of these new areas, okay? There is going to be a lot of change and a lot of cultural shock to a lot of people that are living in these areas. Now, the weaknesses of Versailles. This is probably one of the most important pieces here. There is no negotiation with those defeated powers, like I said. That war guilt clause that Germany is going to have to agree to, Germany is going to have to take the blame for the entire cost of the war and accept the occupation. Now think about who started the war. Did Germany start the war? No, but they're going to have to basically say it was my fault even though I didn't start it. The reason for that is the Allies are going to consider Germany basically that they should know better. They should have foreshadowed what the possibilities of the outcome of the war would have been when they said, yeah, Austria-Hungary, I'll back you up. The war reparations and accept occupation is a whole other set of problems. One of the major things is the Russians are going to get left out. They have higher casualties than any other nation. They are going to lose more territory than Germany is going to lose in the war. And the reason that they are going to get left out is the Allies felt that they simply gave up when they left the war after that Russian Revolution. The next big thing is they're going to ignore the self-determination of the colonies. And the colonies of Germany, the colonies of their own, and not to mention the transferring of other countries too, especially Britain and France. Now the opposition. Hoover, he believes that this treaty is going to be way too harsh on Germany. The fact of the matter is they're going to have to pay all of this huge war reparations, these $33 billion, but they don't have any colonies to extract any resources from to do so. They don't have, their home infrastructure has completely been destroyed from the war. A lot of other people think it's just a sellout to imperialism. The southeastern Asian colonies of the Germans are going to be given up to places to like Japan. And again, the Ottoman Empire are going to be broken up and given to France and Britain. Some ethnic groups are going to be objecting to the new boundaries. Polish people that have been living under German rule previously are now it's going to be flip-flopped. There's some German people who are living under Polish rule. Okay. So some Republicans are going to say that it threatens U.S. isolationism over this the League of Nations. Henry Cabot Lodge is a Republican. He is suspicious of joint economic and military action against aggression. He doesn't want to have to give up or be forced into acting in a war situation. Wilson is simply going to refuse to compromise with the Republican majority in the Senate, and he's going to go on a speaking tour in favor, trying to get people's support of the League of Nations, and at that point he's going to suffer this massive, massive stroke. And a lot of people are even going to speculate that his wife is going to basically be running the country in the last year of his presidency. He basically goes into reclusion, and no one really even sees him aside from his wife. His wife is kind of the in-between between him and the cabinet to kind of discuss his wishes. But a lot of people, like I said, say that it was his wife that was making the major decisions in the last year of his presidency. When the time comes for a vote, the Senate is going to deny the membership to the League of Nations. We're not even going to get involved with the organization that we helped to create. And ultimately, we have to sign a separate treaty with Germany and Austria-Hungary in 1921. So realistically for us, the fighting or the war itself doesn't end until that treaty is signed in 21. Now, again, like we were talking about with the different areas and different countries, with the Poles being under German rule and now Germans being under Polish rule, pay particular attention to Austria-Hungary and Germany here and the difference. One more time. Poland and Russia. Russia loses a huge piece of territory. Now we have Eastern Prussia. Okay, so if you were a German living here, you now live in Poland. If you were Austrian and you live here, you're now in Czechoslovakia. So you can see how that could be a huge culture shock to people. Now the legacy of World War I. A lot of people consider this a lost generation with the amount of deaths that occurred. We, on the other hand, come out very strong. We're only in the war again for 19 months. It is a fast lane to social change for women and African Americans. There is going to be a significant political upheaval with Russia, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the Ottoman Empire. We're going to see major transitions here over the basically end of World War I and the 1920s. Economic upheaval, Germany, France, and Britain are going to be completely decimated, Germany having to pay the huge reparations back to France and Britain. The Spanish flu or great influenza, 30 million people are going to die worldwide from this. We'll talk about this more with 1920s. These people are going to come home, and especially our soldiers are going to come home from Europe, and they're going to be spreading this Spanish flu, something that we haven't seen before, very much like the bird flu or swine flu that we see today, where it's a different strain of the flu, and we really have a hard time combating it. And we have the birth of a radical Adolf Hitler. It cannot be the 2 million Germans should have fallen in vain. No, we do not pardon. We demand vengeance. So, with the legacy of Versailles, if it's a little bit more fair to the Germans, we may not have seen the birth of this radical Adolf Hitler. Take a look at this chart right here. Look at the deaths. So you may want to pause the video here just so you can take a look. Russia has the most people. German Empire loses the most military deaths, civilians from the Ottoman Empire, and then in total Russian Empire, they lose over 3 million people, 3.3 million people total. Some facts: it's the bloodiest war in history to date. 22 million deaths, over half of them were civilians. 20 million more people were wounded. There are 10 million people that have been displaced or refugees. Total cost, $338 billion. We're going to lose 48,000 men in battle, which is not a lot, but we're only there for 19 months. And 62,000 more are dying of disease, and 200,000 are going to be wounded in the process. Wilson is going to call it the war to end all wars, but that's just simply going to carry until World War II, and we're going to see something much, much worse. So let's recap. You should be able to describe Wilson's plan for peace. Again, the 14 points and that League of Nations. Discuss the debate. Republicans don't want it. They don't want to give up the right to declare war or to be isolationist. Number 3, identify and understand the weaknesses of Versailles. Again, not including the defeated nations. That is a huge, huge problem. And number 4, understand the legacies and impact that World War I had on the countries involved. We're going to come out of it as a superpower, or beginning superpower, and France and Britain are going to be torn. Germany is going to have to pay that huge reparation, but they don't have any supplies or any colonies to do so, which is going to basically cause a worldwide depression or lead to one of the major reasons of the worldwide depression in the 1920s. So if you have any questions, let me know. Shoot me an email. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. I'm out.